of course, again, over time.
I think also the other thing, maybe for laws of libel and things like those, sometimes people could be a bit uneasy. But I would want Dr. Matiang'i, when he closes down and finds a factory, the sugar in a warehouse, he should tell us this sugar was imported by so and so. And as Patrick said earlier, you cannot rule out the politics behind it. Some years back, there's a very famous politician from Mombasa. I won't name him, but he was the leading importer of sugar. Actually, his official nickname was Sugar Daddy. And he was the one funding most of the government or KANU campaigns back then. So payback, he was being allowed to import sugar freely. And I suspect this could be what might be happening in this case. Some people might have sponsored influential people in the government. Now it's payback time. Give me, I import sugar.
Okay.
Yep.
And let me bring in Patrick Amimo, who has vast experience in coverage of matters, corruption, and now we'll look for another term, but even contraband. And maybe, Patrick, is there a link between the corruption that we see in the country and this particular issue on contraband, and the fact that both cases have hallmarks that we can follow? Those hallmarks being, with corruption, for that amount of money, for example, to be used to be moved from NYS, there must be very highly placed people. For this sugar to be in the country, because we're not talking about sugar that was stopped at the port. This is sugar that is already in warehouses. Then it shows us that there must be, or rather, it kind of forces us to assume there must be some big names behind this that know, because that sugar to have gone through the port, to be in the warehouses, there's got to be something. What link do we have between the corruption cases and the contraband, if any?
As it were, this is a very intricate cartel that is involved in the sugar industry. Like Thomas Sanchez rightly put it, that sugar daddy, that was the person who used to fund the KANU regime then. This person had preferential treatment and could import sugar into the country duty-free, so without paying tax, and then end up selling it at a very huge profit. So it's the same cartels that are still running the show, in that, but only that they have passed over the baton to a different regime, and now we have different players. That's why, as matters stand now, it could be a matter that probably it's a business rivalry, matters gone sour. Probably one side did not meet the other end of the deal, and that's why now it's, as payback time, they have to ferret out these particular individuals. That's why you can see the way detectives are moving. It's like they know where this sugar, the warehouses where this particular sugar is, because their target is very specific, and they get to the warehouse and you're told this is the sugar. And it's what so far has come to the media is the police story. They are the ones who are telling us that this sugar is laced with mercury and copper, but the government chemist is very, very silent, something that should be of concern, because if indeed this particular sugar is poisonous and it's injurious to the health of the public, then we could have seen the government move in, the Minister of Health move in, and in fact order impounding of this particular consignment from these warehouses and also in the shelves. But that action has not been taken. So far, Kenyans are still consuming this particular sugar that is in our various stores. We've heard nothing from the government chemist on whether this particular sugar was taken to their laboratories and what it's all about. The only thing we've heard is that some of those targeted importers coming to and saying that their sugar was allowed into, was cleared by KEBS, and they were to be further processed to make sure that it's fit for human consumption. Despite this, what is emerging is that we are facing a situation where our sugar industry is collapsing, especially in the Western Kenya. The sugar industry has collapsed. In coast, we had Ramisi. Attempts to revive Ramisi really suffered a stillbirth, and it is a concern in that sugar farmers, especially in the sugar belt, cannot. They are now being more impoverished as decades move by. We've seen a company like Zoya owing farmers billions of shillings in cane deliveries, and these farmers now, it makes them poor. And what we see is that there are attempts to privatize this particular sugar factories from being state companies to individual or private companies. And if that is the situation, then you can see where now these particular individuals are coming in, that probably they privatize the sugar industry, and now we end up importing sugar from Brazil and or Egypt, which which is a very dangerous thing because we'll be importing our labor to these, we'll be exporting our labor to these other countries and make the unemployment situation in the country very dire, and also those farmers that were depending on sugar, the sugarcane farmers, more poor, and these populations also unhealthy. Michael.
All right, thank you very much, Patrick. And Julie, there seems to be a huge link between, and this is not the first time, basing on what Caleb and Patrick have said, in regards to sugar, I think it was Tom, the sugar daddy. It looks like sugar has a huge market and an ability for one to make good money if especially you're working within the government or there's a political side to it. How do we follow this up to ensure that as the media we've uncovered that this is not a uniquely, it's not something that's just happening this season. It may have happened before.
Yeah, I think that history is good for people who don't understand it to understand basically the history of what's happening now. It's interesting that neither Tom nor Patrick mentioned the sugar daddy by name.
And should that be where we would
where
be?
we start,
Yeah.
despite the fact that it was an era past. So technically we should be able to say his name. So there's some kind of fear of consequences for calling out these people by their names, yeah? Because we should have done this a long time ago to just expose the whole thing and let people understand exactly what's happening. And in the same vein, why are we importing sugar? Why can't we revive our sugar industries in this country? Of course, it's political, but it seems like a no-brainer to just put resources and human capital into our local sugar industries and produce enough sugar, the amount of sugar that we need. So, of course, it's very highly politically connected. But where we start is just telling the story as it is, confronting it and saying, these are the people who've been doing this. So now how do we move forward from here? Because as we hide behind the veil, 2022, we'll be talking about the same thing. You know, it's just going to be
Absolutely.
a continuous cycle.
And Caleb, maybe to bring you back, why do we hide these names, especially when they're known? It seems like to you and Patrick, it's obvious.
Yeah.
And it should be obvious to the public, but if it is that obvious, why not mention the person?
I think because sugar issue, the same cartels behind sugar are as vicious as the same cartels that are behind drugs and drug business in this country.
Well, we're not saying that whoever the sugar daddy was brought in drugs, but it seems like it's almost in the public domain that it is known that the sugar daddy, and that's why he was called sugar daddy anyway, is because he was dealing with sugar.
I know.
And the reason I'm asking that question is because as the media, sometimes looking at the response we have here, the biggest number of, the percentage of those saying what we should do is give names, is put a face to this saga. But we seem to have a difficulty in putting a name to putting names to this saga. Yet they may be known.
Yeah. I think the media are driven by the fear that was set by the judiciary in matters of defamation, when huge penalties are slapped against them. So that fear drives the media. Should I name, and what are the consequences I'll suffer? Then also the individual reporters, am I safe to name? Because the people have been killed, people have been injured, people have been maimed. The time will come, if you come to a time when people will be assured of protection from the cartels, then probably people will be talking more with much ease.
All right, Tom, what do we need to have in place for us to name?
I think the onus lies on Dr. Matiang'i. He's the one who told us this sugar in the market. I think it's up to him to tell it is Caleb who imported this sugar. If he named it, I'm sure we can run with it.
But if we are saying that there is such a huge political connection, chances are politicians are not going to be the ones to name. That's where we come in as the media. Why can't we? And even as much as we say that we should put our weight behind investigative journalism, what are those investigators going to do, if not name?
I think that what Caleb was saying, this fear of huge fines, I think that's what makes people fear naming names. Yeah.
Julie, do you buy the excuse of huge fines? Shouldn't we be in a place, in a space where we have done our legal homework to a point where by the time you're bringing a name, you're doing it with the legal backing that is required?
Yeah, you actually believe, you know that the story is true before
Yes,
you name the name.
it's verified.
I think more than a fear of fines, it's a fear of death. These are cartels. It's a fear of being harmed. You're afraid for your family, for your livelihood, your life, because these cartels, as we understand it, are more or less running the country. And that's the establishment and the status quo, and they're not going to let go of that easily. So journalists will be putting their lives on the line. So you ask yourself, is Kenya worth it? Is this story worth it?
Is it worth your life?
Exactly. You weigh the pros and the cons, basically. At the end of the day, what's going to come of you? What is going to be the huge benefit of you telling that story? And is your life worth it?
Well, the question then would be, and let me refer now that it's a football season, there is the Ghanaian journalist who did this story on bribery of, referees who are receiving bribes, and that, of course, hit us as Kenyans. And I'm sure for him to do a story like that, we're talking about, it's an international thing, and his life could also be at risk. So is it that we don't have journalists who are willing to put their lives on the line, or is it that our laws do not protect us well enough, Caleb?
I think we've come a long way. If a media house invests in investigative journalism as a house, and you have a team that is investigating, then it's safer that way. So it's a team of, let's say, 4 or 5 journalists with the backing of their lawyers, backing of the media house, with resources. Then they'll feel safe enough to investigate and tease out all these names that we are looking for. But individual reporters, no story is worth dying for. And I think in Ghana, the government and institutions have shown that, have proven that they can defend and protect their own. So we have a lot to learn from them. Yet, once upon a time, we were ahead of them in the matters of democracy.
Okay. Tom, what do you think needs to be in place for you as a journalist to feel safe enough to break a story to a point where even if your life or the life of your family members was at risk, you'd feel secure enough to do your job?
I think, as Caleb just said, it's always good to work as a team, so that most of these characters are very vicious. They look at it like it's a personal thing against them. But if you're working as a team, and you have, I believe every media house has a legal advisor who will direct you that this is the angle this story should take. Don't do this, don't do this. So that when you're putting the story on air or in print, it's a solid story. Even if the other party goes to court, they're going to lose. Yeah, I think that one. But at a personal level, I think the other time we were here with Eric Oduor, the Secretary General of KUJ, and he spoke of having safe houses for journalists who think their lives are in danger. I think those are the kind of things we need to encourage.
Okay.
That KUJ comes strongly, that you do a story. If you feel you're not safe enough. I remember Eric saying there's even time they've had to ship out some journalists out of the country for some time for things to cool. So I think the KUJ should also play a bigger role in this, that tell the journalists that we have your back. You do your story. If things go out of hand, we'll take care of you.
All right, and Julie, you've written stories on the newspaper which sometimes may come out as controversial. Have you ever felt like you're at risk? Have you ever felt like this story could actually jeopardize your life or those of your family members?
Yeah, well, I felt scared a couple of times. And you try and couch things in a way that you are saying it without saying it. But I do believe that we need to speak up.
Would you have wanted to do some of the stories differently and make it more bolder, make it more factual, make it more, in your face?
Definitely.
Why didn't you?
Scared.
Is it because you've received threats, or is it just because it could be an
it could have been perceived. It was the atmosphere was very tense last year, the whole of last year basically, and into the 2 elections. It was very tense, and everything that everything that you said was being weighed. You didn't have confidence that what you were saying would not be taken badly. So you had to really couch a lot of things. It could have been a perceived fear, but I really felt that tension. And more than that, even the people who edit my stories would sometimes call and say, we had to change this here, or switch this up, or make this a bit calmer because you're being too forthright with it. So it was like a two-way thing. So we're kind of like self-censoring as journalists and editors and whatnot. Okay. But on that note, I'm not sure there's a story worth dying for.
Well, they say that there's no point dying because, you need to be there to tell another story.
Exactly. And just one more thing. But the good thing is that we have social media and content creators in every single Kenyan who's on that platform. For example, now people are naming names on Twitter. People are naming names.
But the challenge with social media is, are they verified? Because again, they come back to us to get the authenticity of the story.
Yes, but okay, it's true. The challenge is, are they verified? But there's a lot of truth there. So now for people who really want to dig deeper and you're finding that you're not getting what you need from the legacy media, just go dive into the social media and try and swim in that sea of information and and figure out what you think might be the truth.
All right.
Because
Okay, and I want to hear from Patrick Amimo as you give us your wrapping thoughts, Patrick, because we are running out of time. And you've done this for a long time. Have you ever felt like you're at risk? What are some of the things that you'd feel safer as a journalist if they were in place for you to continue doing the work that you're supposed to do, Patrick?
See, these at least it needs at least also collaboration with those investigating agencies. Especially now we saw like what is happening is that Dr. Matiang'i is telling us is said that there are people who are making calls even to those maybe customs officials trying to maybe try to influence them. But he's not ready to tell the media who these particular individuals are, because if he were to play his role and say, now these particular individuals have been trying to interfere with our investigations when we are doing a crackdown on sugar, then the media will have an opportunity to report on that and try to follow up on these particular individuals. Look at the case of Ghana. That journalist who investigated the current saga involving the World Cup. We saw the Ghanaian government move in fast. The sports minister disbanded the sports organizations, and everything was under probe. It's not the first time that we saw this Ghana take action over reports that were initiated by this particular journalist. There was a time that, based on reports from the same journalist, the entire judiciary was sacked. That action, we've not seen it coming from a Kenyan government. There's lack of political will. What happens is that people just make it a joke, and it makes, with that particular joke, then there's no sincerity and political will to enforce this particular thing. And when like media now comes out and says they want to report on particular matters, you see people run to court and seek injunctions. So with so doing, the courts give them those injunctions, and media is gagged. It cannot canvass that topic anymore because you are gagged, and now these particular individuals say you cannot discuss that matter due to either defamation, which is defamation punitive fines. So those particular issues we need to have political goodwill, and also those investigating agents, as it were, as Masika has rightly put it, we now have social media. We need to make good use of those social media. When those revelations are coming through that particular citizens journalism, it's part of that popular public participation, which investigating agencies should take charge of and follow up these particular issues, because these particular things happen. These particular properties are known where they are constructed. People know, and they know who it belongs to. So we need to see also our police, our multi-agencies taking a proactive role from reports on social media and also crack down on it, because I don't understand why NIS should not take a lead role, given that they are getting huge amounts from the budget. This time around, that 1.2 billion shillings.
All right, thank you very much, Patrick Amimo, for joining us this morning. And let me come now and get your closing and wrapping thoughts. In this regard, I'll start with you, Caleb, very briefly, as we're running out of time.
I think the media are doing a good job. They should continue, but they must not be allow themselves to be used to focus on the squirrel and let the elephant take off.
All right, leaving the elephant to take off. All right, your closing thoughts.
I think the media is doing a good job so far, but they should do more. And I think it's the only media which Kenyans have trust in now. I was shocked the other day reading social media, people asking how much money has Rotich allocated for corruption in his budget. We've sunk that low. So
Julie, your closing comments.
I think we could definitely do better, myself and all the rest of us. And I think it's courage. After this discussion, we need to be more courageous and say the difficult things. Of course, not die for our story, but take the step to go one step further than we have, and reveal some of these things and let Kenyans actually know the truth.
All right, thank you very much. And that is Julie Masiga, who's a journalist. We have Caleb Atemi, who's a communication consultant, and Tom Osanjo, who's a veteran journalist. Thank you for joining us this morning. And also Patrick Amimo, who is joining us from our INM studios in town. But that's where we wind up this segment of the show, which is the newsroom. But do stay with us right here. We have more coming up for you, including updates on the World Cup.